want to make sure everybody understands is this is a situation that nobody wants to be in. Okay? Nobody should have to deal with these issues. But the reality is they're staring at us in the face. And you see it every day when you're downtown. You see it when you're driving up I-5, when you're in Eugene, Corvallis, downtown Sweet Home. Homelessness is an issue that affects all of us, directly or indirectly. You may not know this, but you as a taxpayer in the city of Sweet Home, as a group, have probably put in well over $100,000 to mitigate the homelessness issue in our community already. So we're all stuck with it. It's an issue that has to be addressed. We at City Hall, and of course, if you're on social media, you will see people complain all the time about our downtown and about how we need to clean it up and how we need to do things to support businesses, and how there's bums sleeping in doorways, and we need to do something about that. And we get calls in City Hall about that all the time. You know, why don't you guys do something about that? Why don't you go do this? And the reality is, there's not a lot we can do. So particularly recently, it's been made very clear to us, courts have said, constitutional rights are for everybody, whether you're a homeowner or homeless. You're afforded the same protections by the Constitution and by the laws, the Constitution of the state of Oregon, the US Constitution, and all of the laws that relate, whether you're homeless or a homeowner. And so they've, particularly Boise v. Martin was a big one that came out. And we have copies of that stuff here, if anybody would like to take a look at it and read it. But essentially it said you can't criminalize someone that's alive. They have to be able to live, and part of living is sleeping. Everybody has to sleep. So you're not allowed to do anything to criminalize that activity unless you provide, or there is a space for them provided to live and lay their head at night, is the term that's utilized. That law got tested, or that decision got tested very quickly in Oregon, in Grants Pass particularly. And the appeals courts in Oregon upheld and expanded on that just a little bit with Grants Pass. And so essentially where we're at is, if we want to address people sleeping in our doorways or sleeping in public parks or those kinds of things, there has to be a place for them where they can be. You can look all around and see where people have tried different things to address this issue, and it has failed miserably. We've all read in the newspaper or seen articles on pieces on television and the news about Portland and Seattle and Eugene and these big cities that have a lot more resources than Sweet Home, spending millions and millions of dollars. And we've all seen what that's resulted in. So as we've been working as a city, as both the council has directed staff to try and help solve this problem, with the Community Health Committee, which is a committee that meets monthly, open to the public, and various people have come and helped with that committee and come and gone and been a part of it. They've been looking, and we've been looking at places that have seen some success in how they deal with this. There are a lot of places, again, that haven't had success. And so we've tried to look at those and say, well, why didn't it work? But there have been a few communities that have experienced tremendous success. Tremendous, I guess, is kind of a qualifier there insofar as how would you define it? But compared to what most people are going through, what other communities are going through, there are a few communities that have been much more successful. Gresham has been really successful in their efforts. Redmond, Washington has been very successful with their efforts. There's a small community, I want to say Stockton, California, but that's not right, but it sounds similar to Stockton.
Yes.
What was it?
Modesto.
I don't think that ever looked at, but there's another community in California, and then Walla Walla, Washington. So the Community Health Committee has been working to address this issue and trying to find solutions I can recall very specifically a meeting in the conference room right over here one evening where people wanted to open a resource center. And I probably stepped over the line and said, no, we are not just going to throw money at this and waste it when we can't see that there's going to be success on the other end. And so we kept looking and we kept looking until we came up with some kind of a template that the committee thought was applicable to our situation with the resources we have. One of those templates, one of the things in that template was understanding that government's not good at this. The city of Seattle, millions of dollars, fail. City of Portland, millions of dollars, fail. City of Eugene, millions of dollars, fail. You can go down the list. Places that have been successful have engaged with other agencies and nonprofits. Whether some are religious, there have been religious institutions that have stepped up. Some are just nonprofits of people with pure hearts that want to help, both help their community and help the homeless at the same time. And so that was a model we looked at because as a city, we don't have the finances to be doing this all on our own. So the community health committee worked really hard. They took time, spent a couple days up in Walla Walla, met with their assistant city manager for about 4 hours. Walked through the facility, talked to the executive director. They've been very, very supportive. It so happens the executive director actually grew up in the Willamette Valley. Has helped give information and answer questions on things that have worked for them and things that haven't worked for them. And their assistant city manager has been great about answering emails and answering the phone and helping us with questions. So that's a little bit of background for you of why are we here. Essentially, if we want to do anything to help the situation in our downtown community or in any part of our community, we don't want them camping in parks. The city has spent a significant amount of time trying to make improvements to parks. I think anybody can agree over the past couple of years, Sankey is drastically improved. That's a $240,000 grant from the state that we didn't match in kind to make those improvements down there. It's not quite done. There's still a little more to do there. We've done some little things at some other parks to help improve those, and there's more to come. We had a goal of making our parks a place that kids and families could enjoy. And I think if you go to Sankey now on a day with some good weather, there's always kids there playing and families there having picnics, particularly in Lower Sankey Park. And so it's been successful. And I can tell you to get there, our police department was walking through the park every morning to get people out that were camping. And they were coming through every night to try and get people out that were trying to camp. And our code enforcement officer, that time, it's not the same code enforcement officer, also did a foot patrol once a day, Monday through Friday. And the police department didn't just drive by. They got out and they walked through the park to make that place and change what it was. It took a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of community support. And we don't want it to go back to what it was. And we don't want to see that anywhere in the community. But the reality is we can't enforce no camping ordinances. We can't enforce overnight parking restrictions unless there is some place for them to be. The Community Health Committee looked at every vacant piece of property in the city of Sweet Home and to decide which one would work best. And the one that we thought would work the best, and there were also some criteria within those case laws, would be relatively close to services, healthcare services, mental health services, food, those kinds of things. And so it was really felt that property off of 24th Avenue, kind of to the west of the public works shop, which is owned by the county, would be the best site, and it would affect the fewest people within the community. And the county was all for helping us. Commissioner Tucker's been a champion for us in that. He worked really hard with us to try and expedite the county working with us to do that. The problem is we all got excited and we started going forward and paperwork was getting done and groups were starting to get donations and raise money for it. And then luckily somebody stepped back and said, oh, wait a minute. We don't have a designation from DEQ that property is claimed because there's a tax foreclosure and that property has actually been deemed dirty, environmentally dirty, for lack of a better term. And so we don't know what that is. Now, the problem with that, this is a kind of a whole nother side set, is if you own a piece of property that DEQ has determined is environmentally not clean or polluted, you are liable for the cleanup of that property in perpetuity. And simple ownership puts you in that line. So, and there's no guarantee. You may meet the DEQ and the EPA requirements in 2022. But if their requirements change in 2042, because you own that property, you are required to be involved in bringing that property's pollution levels to whatever mitigation says. You are never out from under that weight, so to speak. So that's why the city has been hesitant to take over property that does not have a specific designation or an agreement from DEQ, because we don't want that liability in perpetuity. And to go through that process, you're trying to get what's called an NFA, or no further action, or a PPA agreement with DEQ, where they recognize, okay, we know what's here and we won't hold you liable. Basically, they agree that you're not liable. That process can take a significant amount of time. And so we're in a holding pattern with that property until it gets some kind of a designation. So the community's coming up on winter. As we find all this out, it's getting cold. You have people living in tents or not tents. And so the committee worked hard to try and find another site quickly so that we could get people housed and sheltered through the cold weather. I think we're all aware, very recently, one of the members of our homeless community passed away. Another member of the homeless community was treated for what we believe is carbon monoxide poisoning. Another member of that community trying to stay warm, their tent caught fire. So we're trying to do something quickly to be humane. And that's what's got us to this point. The community health committee has worked really hard to try and find something that is going to do what it needs to do to help our law enforcement be able to enforce trespassing laws, no camping laws, overnight parking restrictions, that kind of thing, so that if people are downtown or up in your neighborhoods, the police now have the ability to move them along and have some place to for those people. So that's kind of where we're at. That's a real kind of quick, down, dirty, brief history on where we are. I got some notes here. So I have gotten, I should have introduced myself. I'm sorry. My name is Ray Tallery. I'm the city manager. I work for the city council. So as staff, our job is when city council gives us a directive, and it's a majority. So there's, of course, 7 members on the council. If 4 of them basically vote to get something done, it's our job to do it. Sometimes we have 4-3 votes and 3 people dissent with that decision, but as staff, we're bound to follow the majority's decision. Please understand your city councilors spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and get very little in return. So one thing is, as we move through this process, please be respectful. Nobody in this instance is bad. It's kind of normal human psychology to try and create a bad guy in situations, but that's not the case here. Everybody's trying to do the best that they can within the rules that were being forced to play in. Your city council is elected in our community. Some communities are different, but in our community, they're at large, which means they are elected to represent the wishes of the 9,800 people who live in the community. Their job is to do what they think does the most good for the most people for the longest period of time. Some communities have different wards. They call them wards or communities or neighborhoods or parishes that they represent, but that's not the case in Sweet Home. In Sweet Home, they represent the entire community. So with that, I've gotten is Leah here? Leah has been great about trying to work with us and convey information to members of the HOA. I worked hard to try and give her answers.
And you've been great to work with.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate your attitude and compassion and respect for what we're going through,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you've made it easier.
Good, good. We as staff are here tonight to work with the community to mitigate homeless issues on our community. That's what we're here to do. And the council is here to hear your concerns about dealing with the homeless community. What we need to, so we just need to make sure that we're respectful tonight as we go through this process, please. And understand nobody's here to do bad. Nobody's trying to harm anybody else or hurt anybody's property in any way. So a couple things real quick. I'm going to go through some of the information that Leah and I have shared back and forth so that everybody can hear the questions that she sent me and the answers that we have. Staff is, of course, obviously this is a pretty popular issue, right? So staff has also gotten some feedback and they're going to share some things and give answers. And then what we'll do is from that point, we'll spend 60 minutes listening to anybody's concerns and answering anybody's questions. Everybody will get 3 minutes to ask their questions. Again, please be respectful at all times and please, let's try not to talk over each other. Some of the answers might be we don't know yet. We may not have all the answers today. Okay. But what I promise you is if it's a concern for you, we will work to have an answer and to address that answer as we continue to move forward. Are there people online? Okay. So people who are online, throughout this evening, they can type their questions in on Teams. And we'll be able to read them and then answer their questions, but we're going to make sure we address questions here first. So I'm going to assume that we get through everybody's questions and comments and we have some time to address online. But if we don't, we're going to cut it at 60 minutes. Having done things like this for a long time, there just comes a point where it's kind of finishing returns and you're not being productive. But we're not taking the 60 minutes. You're going to get 60 minutes. After we do our talking, we're going to give you 60 minutes. So 60 minutes from 6:30 and I'm wasting your time right now. We're going to give you 60 minutes. So a couple things, I want to make sure everybody kind of knows who's in the room and kind of who's involved in what's going on here. So again, I'm Ray, I'm city manager. Greg Mahler is our mayor. Lisa Gorley is a counselor. Angelita Sanchez is a counselor. And Dave Trask is a counselor. So 4 elected officials who get paid nothing here on their own time to listen to you. This is not a normal meeting that is part of what they do. They're here because they care. I want to take time with Dr. Horton as well. Dr. Horton has spent a significant amount of time trying to help with this issue. Brock Byers is not the executive, Shirley's executive director, right?
Right.
So
I'm just a program manager.
program manager, I guess, for the Family Assistance and Resource Network. Is that the term now?
Senator Group.
Yeah,
Is
the
the biggest
FAC.
group, FAC.
Yeah, so Brock volunteers a lot of time with the FAC and helping with programs. I think everybody's pretty obvious. Chief of Police back there, he's got the badge and the gun, right? Boy. Blair Larson is our Community and Economic Development Director. Greg Springman is our Public Works Director. Brandon Nish is our Finance Director. A lot of you call, you talk to Julie. Julie is our Administrative Services Manager. Sean Morgan does all of our outreach. And I gotta tell you guys, We're so blessed to have Sean on staff here. Has it been 2 years yet? Not quite 2 years. Yeah. Sean has been very good at connecting with our homeless community and actually helping get them into programs and get them into housing. Very recently, he's put a couple people into housing.
It happens.
Yeah.
They ebb and flow.
Right.
But I've got a guy going off next.
Right. So, so we continue to work to try and get people into housing and out of the homelessness, whatever the issue is with them. So, so any questions on all that? So I'll start going through questions just real quick. That I think we've already shared. Some of the answers have changed just a little bit too, Leah. So, as we've kind of discussed and as we've been trying to work through, some of the things have changed just a hair. Like, for instance, the first one, how many sleep structures will be created? I had told Leo I thought plus or minus 30. As we've gone through and looked at how things fit and whatnot, it's not quite going to be 30 huts. I think we settled at 28 or something like that. So, not quite 30. If more people show up than there are shelters for, will tents be allowed? Will those tents be allowed near the fencing of our neighborhood? If more people show up than there are shelters for, there is a contingency. So FAC has actually already purchased some large event tents, 20 by 40, I think they are. And one or two of those would be set up in the back of the facility. And it'd be kind of an overflow where people would go. So if all the huts are full, then there would be a place for some overflow. You know, actually, you know what, Brandon, can we call up? Let's kind of make sure everybody knows first, because I think if people see how it's set up, what we're looking at, it'll kind of help them understand some of these questions. Real quick, a lot of the information that I talked about is on this webpage, and I think Leah has sent this link out to everybody in the HOA that she could. It's a draft page, so we haven't actually. You can get to it if you know the address, but there's not really a link to it off of any main pages yet, because we wanted to make sure we had accurate information on it. But we will get that up here shortly. Honestly, our web guru person has been out on vacation for a few days and just got back in the office today, so we'll continue to work on that for you. So this is what we're looking at. And if you can see here, this is the highway. This is the building you're in right now here at City Hall. This is a fence line. Excuse me, this yellow is a new fence line that would go in. This is the annex that may get moved in there. And you can see that there's just some drawings of some huts and then the fence here in the back. This is Joe Grable, our engineer, has been working on this. But give or take, roughly from about the center of the facility over to the closest edge of some property, probably 1262. It's about 400 feet, give or take. Estimate, it's somewhere in that ballpark, somewhere in the neighborhood. So there is a fairly significant gap of space. There would be one, definitely two fences, potentially three fences between property owners and people in the facility. The facility is going to be lit. This kind of shows the design of where some light poles may go. Not only is it going to be lit, it's going to have cameras. It's going to have a security system all throughout and around. So anybody that comes to the fence would be seen on camera. Anybody who leaves, we'd have record of who comes, who goes. And the fence is going to be a slatted fence with the privacy slats. 8 foot high. And the discussion right now is some kind of barbed wire on the top. So we don't want people passing things into it. Like drugs, right? You don't want people passing drugs through the fence. So it would be designed so that it has privacy, and that would hopefully keep that from happening. Does that give everybody a good idea of kind of how the facility sits and where it sits? So it's on the west edge. It's at least on the opposite side of the city's property from your neighborhood. Can we see that? So it's right here. So you have that whole grassy, gravelly area, and then half of the asphalt, and then you have the fence. Yeah,
And with the overflow 10 feet,
back here, inside the fenced area, just set up right here in the back. Everybody see that? Everybody kind of clear on how, at least right now, preliminarily, that is how it looks like it would sit. What I will share with you is as we're going through these things and you have ideas on things that can make it better, we're all ears. We'd absolutely listen to any suggestions that you might have. And we're open to any ideas. All right. Cars and campers. Campers will be a no. There will be no campers. No RVs. None of that will be allowed. Cars, though, would be allowed, but people would not be allowed to sleep in them. So, the whole idea is not to create a space where people just come and live. The whole idea is to create a space to steer people where they can then be paired up with services that maybe helps them find a job and then helps them find an apartment. But to get to their job or to get to their medical appointments or whatnot, they may need a car. They may have a car. And so there would be some parking over here, along here for people in the facility to have cars parked.
isn't the best drop off and pick up?
It is. Is this a night-only shelter? No. This would be a 24-hour facility. And we learned that, and actually they mentioned that in the email. Somebody brought an email last night. Yeah. The counselor mentioned that when they went from a 12-hour, they still had some issues at a 12-hour sleep-only center because people were kicked out, so they would migrate back and forth. With COVID, it kind of forced them to go to a 24-hour facility. And they actually found that was a great answer because people pretty much stayed in the facility. And so that mitigated a lot of the transient in and out, in and out, in and out. And so this would be a 24-hour facility. FAC is going to man it during the day. There will be a security guard there at night. And so there will always be people there. Will the resources be available to any homeless persons, even if they don't qualify to spend the night inside the camp due to drugs or non-compliance? Yes. The idea is to help people escape whatever their issue is that's causing them homelessness. So remember, homelessness is not the issue. Homelessness is a symptom of another issue. Something causes the homelessness. It could be drugs, addiction. It can just be poverty. That's probably the simplest one. It could be a veteran with PTSD. It could be somebody with schizophrenia or other mental health issues. The idea of the facility, though, is have people in one location, mitigate their impact on the outside of the community, and pair them with resources to help them not be caught in this endless cycle of homelessness. If people don't comply, the idea again is to have a system in place with both rewards and consequences. One thing that we learned when we were in Walla Walla is there's kind of a subculture inside the facility. And them having their own space in a hut is highly valued. And they found that if somebody did violate rules or procedures or policies, simply telling them they had to leave the hut and go to the overflow where they had to now share space was a huge lever for them to help effect change in these people's attitude. It will be night security. And it will be a paid security officer. It will not be a police officer. Walla Walla, I believe, has direct radio contact with their police department, their security guard. They don't have to call 911. They have a radio, boom, I need help, and this is extra support. Yes,
I have a question on that. So the security guard, one security guard at $80,000 a year, are they gonna work 7 nights a week?
how about,
7 nights a week? They only have one
Yes.
security guard?
yes,
They're getting 65 days a year.
It's one position.
it's one position,
One there.
but so a company will provide that service. And they will work with, I see what you're saying, like, are they gonna work 7 days a week? It's probably 2 security guards covering all 7 nights. Will we be screening for registered sex offenders and report this as their address? Yes, so we've already set up an actual address. It's 3221 Main. So if there are sex offenders who, as a condition of their release, have to report where they are, they would do just like anybody else. If there's someone in, you can get online and look and see where they're registered, that they would have an address and they would be able to register. It is not in plans of a children's park in the lawn area. How can we ensure no offenders are near it? We can't ensure no offenders are near it now. You can go to any park or any place, and there may or may not be a sex offender in the park right now. That being said, that's another reason for this to be temporary as a site, and to look to find a place that's better, that's not close to a park. How will we ensure that those turned away are not willing to follow your rules, will not be camping in the wetlands? Part of that, we would rely on your help for that. So the wetlands are private property. Your homeowners association owns those. You get to set the conditions for its use and for its protection. So if someone's setting up a camp in there, you call the police. And since we have this location now, the police can enforce no camping ordinances. So we would just, yes,
Even because it is
Well,
private
yeah.
property, regardless if there's space at the site. Private property owners have the right to use anyone onto their property. So
Right.
if you don't want somebody camping on that property, they can be moved along immediately.
so you pick up the phone. If you see somebody sitting out there, pick up the phone. We're more than happy to come and help you with it.
Could we just submit a blanket trespass order for the property?
Yes, we actually have a building watch program, and so what's it called, Sean? Property watch, thank you. Program that allows us to do that, and we are engaged with a number of business properties and commercial properties around where they give us that authority, basically at night. If there's somebody on the property that doesn't belong there, we can move them along without contacting the building or property owner or responsible person. So yes.
So we have a form for that. I assume the HOA would just vote aye. Then your president can sign off on it. Probably want to include the minutes of the meeting. Just to show that it's all, how we ended up.
I do have one question about moving them along. If the facility is full, the overflow is full, then they are still allowed to be in public spaces, correct? You cannot prevent them from being in a public space
Well,
at that point, correct?
Yes, you're correct. If this is completely full,
Right.
and there's others, we have to revert back to what Boise says.
To the
And so,
original.
and in essence, we would start operating just as other nearby communities operate. And individuals would be allowed to sleep, put up a tent structure to stay warm or dry, whatever is needed. In the nighttime, and then at 6 a.m., they would have to vacate that with all of their property. So it's not a permanent site that they can just set up and stay in. It's at night, they'd be allowed to set up somewhere, and first thing in the day, they'd have to move along. That's how we would operate.
but that's
Yeah,
not,
only if.
yeah,
full.
that's only if it's full. And it doesn't pertain to private property.
Right, yeah, but it would pertain to public areas
public
still, so
areas.
we revert back to the same situation now. If that facility is
Well, So what we would do is have a conversation of where is the city going to allow overflow camping? And quite honestly, I would say we do it right here. We put it right outside the fence and tell it over anything. And then there's people. Again, part of this is we don't want them in parks. We don't want them in public parking lots. And I'm sure private property owners don't want them in their yards, or wetlands. So,
Well, the goal would be to have them get services to relieve a bad
Absolutely.
hit for the next person and be moving on with their
absolutely.
breaking cycle.
Yeah, and last year, in the midst of COVID, Wallet placed 45 people. Their facility holds about 50, is that right? They put 45 people in the housing in the middle of COVID. So it's doable. We could do it.
How many estimated homes do you have here in Sweet Home?
It varies, but we're doing a point in time count literally right now,
This week,
this
for
week.
unsheltered people. It's a tough question. We have roughly, 30 that we deal with. There's about another 10 to 15 that you see walking around. I got a report from the school district that there are 350 families that are houseless. They're couch sleeping, things like that. So the numbers, we tried to size this facility to a point that we believe it will have the capacity needed to meet the needs of this community. And hopefully it will, but it's hard to tell because the numbers keep kind of, with rents going up, with domestic disputes going up, things like that, it fluctuates constantly.
I got a question. So I drive,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna get your 60 minutes, okay? So just make sure,
Save that
Don't
question.
forget it, don't forget
make
it.
sure you filled out the
I'll
form.
forget it.
Yeah, and we'll call on everybody that filled out the form and we'll go from there. The other thing that's important, couple things I want to point out, and then I'm gonna let staff talk a little bit. This is a temporary site. We are not doing this thinking that this is a permanent site. If we can site and we determine that it's a better location, everything that's being done here can be picked up and moved and taken there. That's the whole idea of what's going on. So we're hoping this is not permanent. The other thing to keep in mind is right now, anybody can go anywhere in our community and start a shelter. They could go rent a house in the middle of your HOA and start a shelter in that home. They could go to the avenues, rent a house and start a shelter, and there's nothing that the city can do to protect any of our community. Brock and FAC are trying to work with us to meet all of the needs. And they're gone so far as to say, hey, let's have a 7-person, they want the community to be a part of it and be part of the solution. They want the community to be involved. And so they've said, let's do an oversight board that determines the policies. 7 people, need an odd number, right? And let's give a member of city council a seat. Let's have the police chief or the police chief's designee, it may be Sean at times. And they've offered to have a member of your HOA on that board as well, to have a say in what goes on. And so if the HOA has an issue, then that person can bring it to the policy board. And then we can work to develop policies that will address these issues that are coming up for you. What we're not trying to do is put it there, dump it, and leave you stranded. That is not the goal. Now, there would be issues if this is where it goes, and the council has not made that decision yet. Okay, the council has not made that decision yet. But if this is where it goes on with a temporary basis being the primary goal, we are going to do everything we can to support it and support the community and support your community. And I promise you that. We're having meetings internally about how we're going to deal with things if this happens. What's going to be the process for trespassing people? Are our codes recent and useful? Do we need to update some of our policies and our ordinances related to trespassing? So this is going to be something that's always in motion, kind of a continual learning type of a thing. Or when issues pop up, we're gonna, no matter where it goes, whether it's here, whether it's at the knife property on the 24th, it's gonna be a constant learning cycle where things are gonna go wrong and we're gonna have to fix the problems. The other thing is the agreement, which has been in front of the council, that release, and it has a 30-day termination notice. So if things aren't working out, the council can say, this isn't working, we gotta do something different. I'll write a letter, 30 days, it's gotta be gone. And we'll find something else. 15 days, excuse me, even better. So 15 days. Okay? So we kind of have a list of some things that we discussed. Brandon, can we bring those up? Okay. So, Greg brought up item number 1.
Yeah, I think from the public works perspective, up until recently, where we've kind of partnered with FAC and they've kind of overseen that site on things all. Public works has spent a lot of time cleaning multiple properties. Both the property we've got at Clark Mill, we had a lot of cleaning out there. Wetland areas, there's been over a period of time, constant calls in, go clean this camp up, go clean that camp, and they get bad. We're taking backhoes and taking dump truck loads out. So we've had other issues with, you talk about sanitation with feces on ground and on property. So since we've been working together with them, we have supplied a couple of dumpsters and some porta potties, and it has fruit. I've granted, it's not an ideal situation, but those efforts between FAC and the city have minimized drastically the amount of time that public works. So that's kind of what some of the things that we see with control of sanitation and environment that can be taken care of.
I'll try to address a couple topics real quick. They're on the board. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeff Lynn, the chief of police here in Sweet Home. And I was born and bred here in town. So I grew up here and have been fortunate to be the chief here for coming up on 9 years now. And so a little history back in 2018, I believe that I first started meeting with, I think Dr. Horton was there, Sean was there, to try to find ways to help and mitigate some of our homeless and our livability issues in town. Because back then we saw them coming. 9 years ago, when I first became chief, if you asked, I was going to be up here advocating for some type of homeless center, the answer would have been absolutely not. But that is how drastic the playing field has changed for law enforcement in dealing with homelessness. Specifically, as the city manager mentioned, those two court rulings had tremendous impacts and are still having impacts on communities all over. So it's just not Sweet Home. So in 2018, we started looking for ways how we can help. And it's been 3.5 years and we're still searching for those answers because nobody really has them. So what we did is, as was mentioned, we started looking for samples and solutions out there. Who's done what that's worked? And really we've hovered towards Walla Walla. And we've had a lot of conversations with them. And so that is, their police department is extremely supportive of their sleep center up there, which this is modeled after. And I'll kind of go into a little bit of that as I talk. But one of the things that many are asking about is our calls for service. And we're going to have them there. And I can't stand up here and say, it's going to run peacefully and it's going to be a perfect situation. Because I guarantee it's not going to be. We're going to have issues there. Our call load, a certain percentage of our calls will follow wherever our unhoused population, because that's the appropriate term, our unhoused population is our percentage of our call load. They're going to be there. And if we look at the existing site down there at 12th that area surrounding Kalmaya and 12th, I mentioned kind of last night, if you were here, that, our call load has probably tripled from when, between 2020, no, between 2019 and 2020. I think I got those years. When it moved down to, the, Highway 228, Holly Road and the Nazarene Church, compared to when it moved back, our call load tripled in this area. So, we are going to have calls for service because I don't know if it's politically correct, but that's the type of individuals that we will be dealing with. And we're regardless of where they're at. Now, I can stand up here and I'm assured that everyone in the city administration, and I would even anticipate the council members sympathize with you and understand the perception you have of it. I totally get it. And every one of us would say, yeah, it's a great idea, but not in my neighborhood. We all understand that. And so we're just looking for solutions that can help out. Call load will be there. You know, our hope is to, the biggest difference that I think that could drive our call load down associated with our unhoused population is FAC. Is that managed versus unmanaged. At 12th, where it's at the current old city hall, that's not managed. It's slightly better than it was last year at the Nazarene Church, but not a whole lot. And so what I'm hinging on and staying up here is, and I'm gonna throw Brock into this, is Brock's ability, he and his organization, ability to manage it. Because as I talked to Walla Walla, you know, the few things that they believe made a huge difference in their call load and the success of this potential fleet center was the rules and regulations that were strictly enforced. They said that was huge. There are three things actually. Bringing in additional resources to assist those who are suffering from, you know, homelessness. And the third thing, when they moved it to a 24/7 operation rather than just the nightly sleep center. That's what I'm hinging all of my hopes on. And I'll be honest with you, we could stand up here in 3 months, 6 months and say, well, this was a horrible idea. And I've done that before on different topics, you know, the Nazarene Church, I implicitly put my backing behind it. And then at the end of it, I was like, this is a horrible idea. And I can't believe I thought this could have worked. And so I hope and I pray that that's not what happens. And I have a lot of faith in God and his team and Shirley and their whole team, because they really want it to work. You know, they've been engaged in an outreach for quite a while. And I believe that, and again, it's not mitigating your concerns or anything, but that we have a chance to really be a focal point of addressing how a small community can address homelessness. Now, again, that doesn't mitigate any of your concerns for putting it near your property, but that's just where I'm coming from and my hopes that this can actually have. Someone talked about staffing levels. We're still, right now, our staffing is low. We have 2 openings and we have several officers in training, and our staffing level is really probably an all-time low for actually boots on the ground that are certified. And we're still dealing with the calls for service. I mean, we still have people out 24/7. We're still responding to every call that comes in a timely manner, and we're still addressing it. I'm not banking on any level of change for calls for service initially. You know, I've got my fingers crossed that with resources in place and with the managed site, that we'll see some significant improvements. I'm not going to bank on that though, and I can't sit here and say, you know, people sort of think I'm not going to sit here and say your neighborhood may not be affected on some level, because it could be a different time. And that's what we hope to be able to address quickly and mitigate and make sure that doesn't happen. Is this going to be kind of like a living program where we see we need to change something needs to alter? I mean, that's our goal, is that we can quickly pivot and address what needs to be addressed. Because let's be honest, there's not many communities that are successful in this. And so Walla Walla, according to everything we've talked to up there, I talked to their captain, even they are 100% behind that. And so it is a concept that could work. Again, it's still in your backyard. And so I can't appease you and mitigate that aspect of it. I have tremendous hopes for it, or I wouldn't stand up here advocating for it. And my hopes rely on Brock and his organization. So, right, was I gonna address something else? The managed, unmanaged, calls for service. Oh, and anything else? There'll be plenty of time for questions. I'll be here. There's so much that we've talked about. We've learned since 2018 that we've been dipping our foot into this topic. That hopefully your questions, I'll either have answers or I'll be able to make Sean find the answer for you. So.
Thank you. One of the things we talked about. So we talked about the distance here. There was a question about why not leave it at City Hall, where it's currently at, and doing it there. There's a couple issues with that. Number one, about 250 feet to the nearest house. This area of our fire district is where our volunteers try to sleep when they're not working. And the things, the ruckus that kind of goes on there a little bit now, again, since it's unmanaged, it affects them. It affects our volunteer firefighters and their ability, and there's some safety concerns having it there when they can't rest. There's also apartments up here as well. So that's one reason why we were concerned about keeping it here, is it's kind of close to some other areas and neighborhoods as well. The other part is we talked, as I mentioned earlier, about part of the success is creating a subculture or a culture within the facility of both rewards and consequences. Having them stay where they're at and trying to have them change their behaviors, it's going to be much more challenging. If anybody's driven by there recently, I mean, you can see the things they've amassed and the mess that is there. To give them kind of a new location is going to make Brock's job a lot easier and make them a lot more successful. Yes.
You just touched on a point that was mentioned last night.
Yes.
So somebody mentioned a concern about community members not being able to access this site to donate items or get items to our individuals. Was anybody ever mentioned that last night?
She's not here tonight. She's not here.
Okay. That is probably part of our, all of that stuff that is accumulated over there has been donated by community members. Either through Shem, don't throw something at me if Shem's in the room, you know, they either gather it from there, which is just a few steps away, or community members are bringing them that. That is why all that is there. And this can also mitigate something when it's managed, that they only have a certain amount of space to utilize. So part of the problem over there is because of the generosity of our community members and so many wanting to help those individuals out. They help to a point where it hurts. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the other issue we can't really stay in Old City Hall is technically the fire department entered into a lease with the city a long time ago, several months ago, to utilize that for training. And right now we are in we're honoring that lease because they can't even use the facility right now. They can't get through where they need to get through. So that's yet another reason why we can't stay there or shouldn't stay there. Again, we looked at every piece of property we could think of. We sat down, looked at a map, an aerial view, any vacant piece of property that was available. We reached out to some private property owners as well to see if they would be interested in signing a lease with the city. We kind of got laughed at for asking, and we can understand why. The other thing we want to point out is security and surveillance. Who brought that up?
Mainly just the, I think we already covered it, the lighting and the cameras that we're planning for the site. We want eyes on this, any facility that goes in, we want eyes on it constantly. We want recordings, we want to know who crossed where, who came in, etc. And so all of the fencing that will be put in is going to be under surveillance. We're going to have interior, of course, within the facility to see things that go on in the middle of the facility. But very importantly, we'll be keeping that fence line under surveillance as well. Nothing should be passed through it. No people should be passing through it. We don't want any damage, any cutting of the fence, anything like that. We're going to have that under surveillance. It's going to be one of the priorities of security, is making sure that traffic is controlled. Because that's one of the problems with an unmanaged site. We talked about the donors who want to give stuff to the homeless. There's also people who don't have such good intention, that actually have very poor intentions. One thing about homelessness is that those who are in shelter are usually at the mercy of other criminal elements in society. People who probably have a home and yet decide to prey on those who are worse off than they are. And so keeping those folks away from the unsheltered population will also help with all of the things that we're talking about. Because right now, anybody can go in and hang out with the folks there and transact illegal business or other harmful things. I don't use your imagination, because you probably come up with something that's very true and very terrible. So that's another big part of mitigating all these other effects that happen, is to really control who's going in there.
So I had no intention of us talking for an hour. But I promised you 60 minutes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who have said they'd like to speak tonight. If anybody hasn't filled out the form and they'd like to speak tonight, go ahead and they're over here. Go ahead and grab one, write that down, and then we will call on you and we will give you your time to speak. Okay? We're ready? Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding we're all between a rock and a hard spot on this. And thank you for understanding that we're just trying to find a solution to a problem to make our community better. So first up, Tim, Breeden?
Yes, breathing.
Breeden? Come on up, Tim.
Thank you.
You bet. And we actually were, if you want to stand over there kind of by that wooden thing and everyone can see you and hear you and.
There's only 6 of us. Can we get a little bit more than 3 minutes?
Well, we're gonna cut that down too.
Okay, my first comment is, when you described that the DEQ was going to hold your feet to the fire in perpetuity. Okay, that means that what is legal now may not be legal 20 years from now. That's called an ex post facto law, and that's specifically prohibited by the United States Constitution. I would look into that and have your city attorney explore that, because they do not have the authority to carry that through. Our house is haunted by things we ignore. The homeless issue has many uncounted costs by not addressing their basic needs. Our downtown businesses are shunned by many who are afraid of seeing the unhoused loose on the streets. And for businesses downtown, this translates into fewer shoppers and less business. By not addressing the problem, it doesn't go away. Shoppers do. Proposed downtown street redesign that the city council is so proud of will not succeed unless the homeless issue is adequately addressed. It's a naive vision unless there's constant police presence for security. And the fear that providing a homeless shelter will attract more of the poor from out of the area is unfounded. All the cities are under court mandate to provide shelter for the homeless.
Many already have plans that are way ahead of Sweet Home's proposed meager outlays. And one counselor here has proposed using cannabis tax revenues to support the new shelters. As someone who reluctantly pays into Oregon's only sales tax, I would welcome the opportunity to help solidify support for the homeless. We have already been called upon to support drug treatment centers, and I, for one, support my tax dollars helping fellow citizens restore their dignity and place in society. So call me a stoner, a badge of honor now compared to those who had denied a chance at a dignified existence. The preamble of our Constitution mandated our government to provide for the general welfare long before the word socialism was invented. A neo-fascist among us who would ignore our fellow citizens and not spend that money to satisfy corporate greed. I want our local government to secure the blessings of liberty for the most vulnerable of our citizens and their posterity. Tomorrow is not just another day. It's another chance to find another way. Yesterday is gone, and I hope tomorrow things will change.
Thank you. Katerina Reinfeldt. Okay. Leah Landgraf.
Well, actually, you've answered a lot of my questions. My biggest question was, why can't we just use Old City Hall? In fact, last night someone asked, isn't it now vacant? And I think it was a council member or the mayor himself, I forgot who it was who asked that. It just makes more sense to a lot of us. I didn't know about the other issues because no one had explained it to us, because you have to admit our neighborhood got caught off guard by this. We didn't get a lot of information. It was insinuated that we don't follow the agendas or information, and we just did this at the last minute to ruin everybody's plans. That's incorrect. I read the agendas every week, every other week when they come out, and they're so vague. It's really hard to tell what it's about. And if it says old mill site, well, it doesn't say old mill site canceled. Okay, it doesn't say we need a new site to come to the meeting. So I propose that the council somehow gets the agendas a little more information for people who do read it every time. Last night, a gentleman came. He owns the property on this side. I am right against that fence. He planned on building a lot of apartments there. And he told everybody last night, he will not if that shelter goes there. Do we really want, in this town that's broke, we cannot afford to fix the street if a man has been asking for 6 years, to turn away all that revenue, all those citizens who will be getting into those apartments,
All that profit.
to pay the bills, to help downtown and to help the citizens there? Yes, all that profit. We want to turn that down and just settle on the spot, or do we want to keep looking for a better spot to put them? We have to. I want to help the homeless. I have actually donated to the homeless. I have been homeless. Okay, my brother is homeless. I have compassion for them, but I find it interesting. A lot of the people who are like, yes, put it here, don't live here. And I know for a fact that our people who have 4 acres or more, who are not volunteering at least a 0.7 acre to put it on their property. And I think it's unfair that everybody wants us to be the bad guys because we just want something better. Better for our retirement, our neighborhoods, and for the homeless all at once. I just think we should dig a little bit deeper. And I'd hate to see all those apartments go. Thank you.
Patrick Rogers, did he leave? Was he outside? Okay. Rochelle James.
I don't really have a comment necessarily. I just have some questions. Can you explain to me what, I guess for you, what a low barrier shelter is? What that means? What that means as far as the people that would be coming in? Do you ever see, I'm assuming that means that somebody can come to the shelter when they're on drugs, they can't use drugs or be intoxicated, that kind of thing, in the shelter, but they can come in that condition. they're accepted in. Is that, you ever see that as attracting, I guess, people who are kind of like in and out, like I'm here for the night, but I'm going for the day. I want to do what I want to do, but I want to come back, take advantage of just the sleeping, but I really don't want to participate in this process.
So to answer a couple things, low barrier is an interesting dynamic. A dog, it may not be a full service animal, but having a dog can be a barrier to many shelters. As you mentioned, alcohol and drug abuse is a barrier in most shelters. The Hope Center that's open, you have to be clean and sober.
Right.
So that's considered a barrier.
In this shelter.
You could be a male. There's a lot of barriers. Now, in our case, we've created barrier. We don't want youth in this particular shelter, but in a lot of shelters, a barrier could be you have a family. So the woman and child could be housed, but the man can't. Or we've seen instances where the man or the woman, and they have two children, but one of them is a boy over a certain age. There's a lot of barriers with that. So we have designated this to be a low barrier, meaning we're not going to differentiate. Now there are consequences, there are rules, it's behavior based.
Right.
Your other question was,
My other question is obviously the chief's saying that they're expecting increased calls.
the influx and outflux of people.
Right.
So within that, there's kind of, you have to be there, and if you're gone 3 days, you leave it. I've at times said tongue in cheek, how many households have had a major domestic violence situation where the male has to leave or female, I shouldn't do that, and needs a place. So, I mean, it can be open in that respect. I think there is the dynamic we mentioned where there's kind of, again, it's behavior based. If we have the shelters, if we run out, then it's the overflow and.
Well, I have one other question.
Okay.
If we have a lot of activity, we're having a lot of increased begins to affect our neighborhood, maybe there's thefts, that kind of thing. What is our recourse if this is supposedly a temporary site? We are complaining, saying, hey, we're being affected. What recourse do we have, or are we really kind of at the mercy of this neighborhood's just going to have to suffer because we don't have any other options, or we're not really looking for any other options because we're just going to accept this amount of issues outside of the shelter?
So one thing I can tell you is that as soon as literally the second the county discovered that this property had not had due diligence done on it for cleanup efforts, immediately started that process. So they have already engaged with an environmental consultant who is doing soil samples and doing the work to work towards that designation, so that we can get to what they call that prospective purchaser agreement level, or the NFA level, depending on what is found in the soil samples. They had done some soil sampling in January, correct, of last year.
Yeah.
So they're not starting with a completely blank slate. So the work is going on. Commissioner Tucker is championing that work for us to make that site available to us. In the meantime, if a large donor comes in and says, you know what, I'm going to buy you an acre and it's in a location that meets, again, this whole facility is being designed so that it can be picked up and moved. So if other opportunities present themselves, we certainly look very hard at taking advantage of them.
The 7-person board is especially important. That is one aspect we felt was especially important. It needs to be the community and from the community. I was excited to hear there may be a member of that community. So, there's 5 positions that they're filling. We filled 2 of the positions. One is a healthcare homeless advocate. The other's an actual homeless person that's on the committee, because it's good to get the broad perspective. But we have 5 other positions. But let's say for some reason they fill a 9-person committee or something like that. I mean, we're flexible, but we feel that the message needs to be representative of that community as well.
So at some point, and we don't know what, this would be one of the answers where I would tell you, we may not know. But at some point, enough would be enough, and that would be a decision of the council to decide to terminate the agreement with FAC. We don't know what that line is. So for instance, calls for service vary. Sometimes there may be a call for service because two of the clients just can't get along. So if FAC can't manage that, a guy comes, hey guys, we gotta stop. It's a call for service, but it might be very, very minor. Certainly if we see an influx of calls, we already do, what's the term you use, Jeff? Problem-oriented policing, right? So we track where calls are, and when we see trends of increases, we put emphasis patrols in those areas. So we would certainly be watching that and watching that data. And you know, I'm here and available. Jeff is always available. We're happy if you have concerns, if you see, hey, we're kind of seeing this or that. Okay, what can we do to help mitigate that? And we'll be certainly open to working with the community to mitigate any impacts. Absolutely. And when the community, as the HOA says, hey, we've had enough, then the HOA picks up the phone and he says, hey, Ray, we want to get on the council agenda. And I contact the mayor and I say, hey, they want to come talk. And then we have that conversation about what's going on and the issues you're facing.
I think the issue that we're wondering about the site where they currently are is that we keep hearing about the issues there, but that's followed with, it's not managed.
Right.
But if you can manage it at this site, which is further out, why are we not able to manage it there at that site? That's even closer to the services that you're talking about. I guess that's the confusion I'm having. If it's managed to unmanaged, why is management out of the question at the other site?
So
Well, what I would initially address on that is there is zero buffer there at that existing site where they're at. One, it's established, the chaos is established there, and that's probably the wrong word. And then there is zero buffer to anything there. And so with this proposed site, there is some buffer. Now, whether it's enough for you, but we have some existing buffer. And then the other thing I'd like to say is that having that active voice for your whole neighborhood will be huge for you. And I do believe that because I guarantee that staff will definitely be listening to the input from your neighborhoods as well as the seven-person advisory board and the council as well. So staff will be highly tuned to that. So having that voice, I think, would be really beneficial for you. But as far as why here versus there, that buffer, there's just no buffer down there for separating.
And I would repeat that technically, the fire department has got a lease to do training in there, and we're violating that lease right now. And they're being very gracious by allowing us to do what we're doing there until we find another area.
The other issue with that site is it's not nearly as big as it looks like. The property line between the fire district and the old city hall actually goes through the middle of the parking lot. And that may seem like not a big deal because, oh, it's the fire department, aren't they on the same team? Well, not exactly, because they're a separate governmental entity. And they have a say as well on the use of that property. It's not the easiest thing to just say, oh, go ahead and do it. So there is some space constraints on that site. It's doesn't have the potential for essentially the magnitude of the problems we have.
Right, kind of add more. The city manager mentioned earlier that there's kind of a subculture that's established at these locations at times. Part of the problem with the current site and not being able to leave it there is that the attitudes are already ingrained in kind of how they've been living there. Moving it to another site gives us the ability to say, here are the rules to come in, here are the rules that you have to follow, and it kind of resets things. It gives them a chance to refocus, re-energize, and really understand that there's a different set of rules than where you had your last location. So that's kind of the biggest difference between the managed and unmanaged. The managed facility, it hits that reset button. It forces them to rehab.
And the last person that filled out a piece of paper, Mr. Stutzer.
I just want to say, before I do anything else, just Dr. Horton and council, I think that you put something really good here together. It's a good thing. You read through everything that's put in here from the policy manual. There are things here that would be very effective and will work really well. My biggest concern in just with the HOA side of things in my own home, I am very concerned about the spillover into our neighborhood. And we are extremely close, and everything that it talks about in here, as good as it is, the facility itself really isn't going to be the issue. The issue is going to be, what are they going to do when they're not in the facility? Are they going to be wandering around the neighborhoods? Because the reality of the matter is that people are creatures of habit and they have a nature to them. We are not going to be cooped up. We're not going to sit in a prison, for lack of a better term. And I'm not saying that this is a prison-like setting, but to somebody that has to sit there all day, every day, 24 hours, that could be a very confining thing for them. And I don't think human nature is going to allow them to just sit there all the time. They're going to move out. They're going to be out into the community. They're going to be looking for things to do. They're going to get bored. This isn't a place that is going to have an entertainment system, for lack of a better term, or constant food source. They're going to have to go out. The other thing that I'm concerned about, and maybe you can answer this question, is within the policy manual, it had talked about there's at least one day a week where they're all going to have to pick up, and you're going to have a major inspection, kind of an idea. And as part of that major inspection, they're going to have to go somewhere from that 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock time period. And that could change based on, who you set up within the system of accountability. But what I want to know is what kind of thing do you have in place for that? Because you're not just going to bust them out and take them to Walmart or to go on a hike someplace up in the mountains. I mean, we're talking about a realistic issue here that they're going to want to be out. They're going to want to be connecting with other people because, again, in my opinion, and from what I see, they're not going to want to sit here all day, every day. And definitely if they have to be out for an entire day, what are they going to be doing? And so I think that there are some things to address there, and maybe.
I think, so partly we acquired rules from Walla Walla as well as other facilities, and an inspection can take as little as a minute, really, if they have everything in order. And the big thing with the inspection is, we're not trying to outwardly find, needles and drugs, but it needs to be clean. They can't sit there. You see down there now, they acquire like crazy amounts of stuff. So it's making sure that the huts are, well cared for. They aren't doing things illegal in the huts, things like that. So the 10 to 4, I think, was based on the rules that they had originally, where they forced their clients to go out at 10 o'clock and they were not allowed to come back till 4. Now that they do a 24-hour managed facility, now they inspect. To be honest with you, initially, we're going to probably be doing, I have certain clients, I'm going to have to do an inspection every day for a while. I have certain clients that are going to help us run the camp. They're houseless, they're unsheltered, but they're working. They have jobs and other things, so they'll be helping out. So I think that's one of those rules that's probably needs to be adjusted and set up. But you're right. During the day, I mean, essentially the facility locks down in the evening. We'll have to set the time. Walla Walla uses a 10 o'clock time, but an evening and a set off. And no one's allowed back in. You could be locked out if you don't come back into the facility. So it's a, there is some rules and boundaries as well as that. And some people may go visit friends or whatever. And it isn't a lockdown situation. It's still a safe place for individuals that they can have their own place. It's lockable. They can lock their goods and not have them stolen or things like that. So you're right. They're going to kind of be an influx. I do understand there's a bus stop out here. Right now, the buses are free because of COVID, but we give quite a few bus tickets and things like that as well. We take people to appointments. When we talk about the caregiving part of it, services, a lot of what we mean by services, we have an individual from CSC that is a life planner type person. And so a counselor, and they're going to be full-time working with all of our clients on, hopefully not being, with alcohol or drug related, getting them care, getting them housing, getting them, the care and items they need. We have other organizations that are volunteering. So when we talk to services, we're meaning a lot. If you look at that book, we have 60 or 80 partners, everything from Habitat for Humanity to the dog group, to dental and actually medical actions as well. So we're trying to bring the community members and people a centralized area that we can bring services to individuals and hopefully get them the help they need.
And again, I think that just from the council side of things to take into consideration, that fear is a realistic fear. It's not something that is going to go away, that they're going to go someplace. And if they have that open door to be able to come in and out of that camp, if it were me, I would be out in the field. I would be going through the apartment complexes that are going in. You have to keep in mind that you're within walking distance from an elementary school. And so there is a huge concern on my part that we have registered sex offenders living here, but we're not far from an elementary school. That kind of scares me a little bit, that we could have people out wandering during the day. We have kids coming home from school. And because of the way that this is set up out here, we have this nice wooded pathway that runs from here to Hawthorne School. Kids walk that, but because these individuals are out and about and they may have nefarious activities that they're thinking of, they may not. We just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that we have a responsibility to protect the kids in the neighborhood. And we also have a responsibility to protect the homeowners in the neighborhood there as well. And again, I really appreciate the city council and the effort that they put forward. I think that this is going to be great. I think that the idea that FAC has is unbelievable. It's one of the better ones that I've heard. I've worked with Dream Center in Los Angeles doing homeless things and the type of work that Dream Center does with that community. And so it's close to my heart, but at the same time, I'm also a realist and I understand that there's going to be spillover into the community, and some of that we can't necessarily mitigate, and we have to take those things into consideration when we're considering placement. Great idea, just maybe the wrong location from what I see.
Yeah, Leah.
I just had two quick questions. I'm sorry. It's easier if I sit here. I'm sorry, but I'm a wreck when I'm up there. Will the lights and the cameras be installed before the first person moves in?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Now we understand that I used to work in social services 20 years. Okay. I understand there is a huge drug and alcohol issue with homelessness. We also understand they're not allowed to have it in the camp. Is the city going to be watching for activities of drug and alcohol in the park that they're creating or here in the park next to it? And if somebody believes, let's say Joe smoked back into the facility after partying it up in our field behind here, how do you approach somebody if you believe they're intoxicated, but you didn't see them do it in the camp?
We don't. We aren't. So that's a low barrier activity. So we all need to police that. I mean, I don't think you'll.
But so they're allowed to be intoxicated in the facility as long as they're not.
We're not the police, so we don't do that.
Okay, so you provide
It's
that.
behavior based, and as long as they're behaving and, not hurting others and things like that, we aren't.
Okay, I just didn't understand that.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I do agree with Eric. I think the facility is an amazing idea. I really do. If this would have been at the old mill site, I'd be excited and I'd be volunteering for it. Okay, I'd be down there helping out the most that I could. But again, that spillover during the day and the people who don't make it to curfew time, where they're going to be sleeping at night, that's my concerns. And thank you for listening. And thank you for your work.
Great. Just to address the pedestrian flow, that was one of the things I brought up that I didn't speak to yet. A lot of people, we are creatures of habit, but we also tend to follow the easiest path, most people. And so the best way to change the way people walk and change where people congregate is to make it difficult for them to go to the places that you don't want them to go to. Most of the time, if you put a fence in front of somebody and it's tall enough, they're just gonna go somewhere else. That being said, there are sidewalks, of course, on Main Street. And so people are going to head that direction. Main Street is going to be the avenue. The interesting thing that we found from the current camp where they are and from our visit to Walla Walla is that it's a surprising number of folks in these facilities. They put Sean was saying earlier, how he can find people there whenever he needs to find them. And they're usually there. So, I'm not sure that there's going to be as much traffic as we might fear. And we're trying to steer people toward the bus, toward toward Main Street and toward them going to the legal places where they need to go. When it comes to the vacant land around the facility, the design of the fencing and the intent is to keep people out of there. That's why the cameras are going to be set up the way they are. That's why the fencing is going to be set up the way it is. We do not want that to happen. And I want, what would be most helpful for staff as we look to these things, if you would, think about, there are a couple questions you might want to ask yourself. What structures or what changes in the way it's set up would make you feel better about it, or would mitigate these issues? And also, what distance is sufficient? That we're dealing with 350 feet at the minimum. Okay, how high of a number do you need to get to? And if there is no number, then that means that there's a problem, because that means that nobody can there can't be a facility anywhere in our community. But if there is a number, I'm curious what that is. And you can, I work for the city, you can find me here. You don't have to tell me tonight, but just something, kind of a thought exercise for you to think about. What's a reasonable amount? And because no matter what, we're going to be within that item for some number of people in the community. We've kind of laid out what works for this particular site and what doesn't work for Old City Hall. We are on the lookout for anything that would meet the need. And so we ask for your help with that. What suggestions do you have? What is a good?
Just to tag on that, because it was within this anyway, one of the things that's in there is about consequences for when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. There was a 24-hour, there was a 72-hour thing, and that there was actually a little place on the top that had a distance that they would be removed from the camp. And right now, at least in the documentation of the draft, that was 300 feet. And so in answer to your question, and maybe the HOA people, is 300 feet enough? I mean, you have a home right here that's what, 486 feet is what we said. And so is 300 feet going to be enough? Because that's what was in here. Do we need that more? And I think that it's really important that we have that type of feedback to them so that they know what that number is, because I agree wholeheartedly that you don't just want some arbitrary number, because then it's not going to be good anywhere. And so what are you really comfortable with? And right now, as it is in the documentation, it was 300 feet.
No, she had a question.
Just about the accessibility, I did notice, up there, number 5 was skipped, and that was easy accessibility to the neighborhood, which is that walking path from Highway 20 onto 40th Street.
Shut it down.
Or access.
Pull up the map.
We did have a neighbor ask if they would be willing to put up a gate, a keyed gate entry for us into our neighborhood from the sidewalk.
So I talked to Vicky Steely
it was
earlier
Vicky.
today. She
Yeah.
brought up that question. So yeah, by the Midway Market, there is that pedestrian walkway. Now that is an easement on at least most of it is an easement on the property where Midway Market is. And then the rest of it is, I believe, HOA property. And so I think that, again, we mentioned this earlier, I think all options are on the table. But I guess the main question is, I don't know, I don't live in your neighborhood. I don't know how many people use that path. So the question is, are you hurting people in your own neighborhood by blocking it off? I don't know what the answer is to that. So the reason that was put in, my understanding was to give people in the neighborhood access to services, businesses and stuff on Main Street, which is a great thing for a walkable community. Now, if that's something that the neighborhood doesn't want, I'm sure that discussion can be had to see about blocking out. My concern, just thinking about it, is that I would hate to block it off when I don't know if it's actually an issue.
Perhaps
And
cameras there would be a good way to monitor it.
cameras or have that be more of a reactionary, item of if a problem occurs, then we block that off.
They were talking about keyed entry or gate codes. That way every resident in the neighborhood would have it. And we do know that sometimes people come from the other neighborhood through there as well. We wouldn't want to just block it off and not have it used. I use that path myself.
Mhm.
And I know several of us use that trail.
So just to tag on a little bit, we talk, people take the easiest route. You're asking them to walk all the way around
We
and
walked
make a loop
through
to
it
come
last
down.
night.
But I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I think Blair makes the point of there's fear that it could be an issue. If it becomes an issue, then I think we can easily tackle it. And we can talk about helping with the gate or the cameras or whatnot. So.
Yeah, a Wi-Fi camera may have enough range to get all the way over to the city hall.
Absolutely, yeah. There might be different options that you can look at.
I would go with that.
So we can certainly talk about that.
I think
Absolutely.
that would be a great idea.
I also have a question about, you're only gonna allow a certain amount of parking in this parking lot here. We have parking on Long Street that's there, and we already have issues with motorhomes and different things getting parked there and people camping there. What's to prevent somebody from parking? I know we've got a truck that's been there for a week already right now. It's
I
just
posted
sitting
it
there.
this morning.
Oh, good.
At about 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
So again,
What's to prevent
No, so-
people from parking their
Nothing.
stuff there, parking their truck
Yeah.
full of stuff and utilizing the shelter?
so this is
This is
one of those things where we
overspill.
have to work together on that.
Mhm.
And where you guys need to pick up the phone. One of the things that we're talking about tomorrow at 10.
Move
Two, yes, we moved it. By the way, I did not introduce, I'm sorry, Robert Snyder is our city attorney. One of the things we're talking about is how to deal with that. And there is a trend where many people who are falling into a homeless situation and losing their homes think the answer is to go buy an RV.
Right.
And Brock is continually, FAC.
Please don't.
That's not the answer, so we're working on both ends to curtail that. I will tell you that RVs are an issue everywhere,
Right.
not just in Sweet Home. You can see them in Lebanon, you can see them in Harvey. There are parts of Portland where the whole street is just RVs up and down, right? But that's a situation where we would need your help, where you pick up the phone and call, hey, there's a vehicle, it's an RV, it's parked on the street, it shouldn't be. We're looking tomorrow at ways that we can strengthen those ordinances in our community and still be in alignment with ORS.
That was gonna be my question.
Yeah.
So we can call and call and call, but what
Absolutely.
is the time frame as far as actually dealing with these vehicles? What
Could
is
be
that?
about your neighbor. having their RV
And
out
that's
to drive.
exactly what we're looking at tomorrow. Our city ordinance says 48 hours. The
Mhm.
state statute says 24 hours. So our city ordinance is more broad than the ORS. So that's a topic to discuss. Do we want to bring that back before council to shorten that up? We had discussed that several years ago and felt it was best to have that 48 hours because there's a lot of people who do park on the weekends.
Right.
Leave their vehicles parked there. So we were trying to find what works best. But it may not work best. And so that's a topic that we're gonna have tomorrow. Because what I want to do is minimize the time to get the minimum amount of time necessary to meet statute. So that some of the problem vehicles, we can deal with much quicker.
And do you know about the motorhome that's behind the Mexican restaurant?
Yes, I've had contact with the property owners. They're aware of it. Unfortunately, that's on private property. And so I've worked with them to get one of the motorhomes off. There were two. This one, we're not aware of an owner, so working.
Is it the one that was towing the black truck on Long Street?
No, I think.
Oh, okay, different one.
So, yeah.
Okay, I have a question about, what are the homeowners' rights for, people that do trespass in their yard? I mean, just yesterday I had a guy dressed in black with this black hood on, and he actually tried to go in our gate in the backyard. and everything, and luckily my husband stopped. So, I mean, they're just walking in your backyards, and you can have no trespassing signs.
Those individuals are usually trying to steal something.
Yeah.
So, I would say really call as soon as possible, so we get it, and I'm assuming you call the police department so we can get there and try to figure out what's going on.
No, my husband, he just took off.
Well, and I would still encourage you to contact us so we get officers in the area, because if they're doing that to your property, more likely than not, they're gonna do it to some other property in that vicinity. So by us being able to get there, hopefully we can find them, identify them, or at least deter them from any more activity in that area.
Because I heard that a lot of people are just being let go, like, you know, they're not really getting into trouble these days, so.
But we are getting a little off topic, but you are correct. You know, COVID has really impacted and still impacts a lot of the criminal justice system.
Well, I'm thinking about, you know, like these people that are gonna be in the shelter. When they get bored during the day, they go wandering around looking for trouble or looking in people's backyards.
And we are
Let's come back here.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
on topic, but I'll talk to you after this because we do have some things going on for those individuals.
So there are some questions online that I want to go ahead and address. Michael M. has asked, what is the city going to do about the crime and vandalism that will adversely affect property values? Statistics show up to 56% increase in crime, theft, and vandalism after a shelter constructed. I've never seen that study. I think Jeff addressed, we expect there will be calls, but we'll respond to them. There are always calls. There are calls in every neighborhood. And again, we use the problem-oriented policing model. So if calls increase, patrols will increase. So we want to work with the community, and whether it's Duck Hollow or the Avenues or anybody, if you have issues, and I wish I could cite the number, but I remember reading a study one time. A surprisingly large number of cases are actually broken as a result of a random citizen calling it in. And it was an ungodly high number, actually. I was really surprised when I read it. But it's just a citizen like yourself picking up the phone and saying, hey, there's some dude that just looks not right. And then the officers drive by and find, you know, someone with a warrant. They get there and they're at least in the neighborhood now when they actually do something illegal. So it's a quicker response time. So whether you're in Duck Hollow or another neighborhood, we're here to answer calls. But whenever you see that kind of activity, we want you to call. Don't think you're bothering us. That's why we're here. That's why these guys are doing what they do. Yes.
How bad will things have to get within this camp for the city to say, okay, we're done with this?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
You said it was an option.
Absolutely.
If certain things happen, well, what would be just kind of an example of what a certain thing would be?
I don't even have an answer for you.
So it's pretty vague and open at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
From my standpoint, it's gonna be a pretty low standard. We're not gonna put up with this. It's not, in my opinion. I don't talk to those guys. But it's gonna be a pretty low bar.
I hope you're doing.
Can I mention something too? Within the lease, I spoke with you last night that I would like to see some sort of evaluation standard at certain timeframes within the agreement so we can reassess. And I would really hope that we could put something like that in there to ease people's minds that we are paying attention and keeping track and have some sort of standard to go by.
So there is, if you look in the draft agreement, there is a section where FAC is supposed to give reports. It's I think right now, like number of clients serviced, number of clients housed that were moved into housing, and one or two other things. If there's data that the council wants or you want the council to get, let us know. We'll try to collect it and we'll put in it.
I would love to see a counselor, the rule that they come in once they come do an inspection or whatever. I don't have a problem with those kind of
Well, just
dynamics.
in case nobody is aware, I volunteered to be a part of your guys' board. And so I'm an advocate for the residents of this community, and I'm also an advocate for the homeless that need the help. And so I feel like the people of Duck Hollow could come to me also with any of their concerns. I'm willing to step up as the.
Yeah, there's the 15-day or whatever
Yeah.
at any time
Yeah,
on both sides.
when, I kind of think it's kind of like, there's a saying, can you define pornography?
I know when I see it.
I'll know it when I see it.
Exactly.
Does that make sense? So I think there will be
It does, but I guess it kind of determines who makes that.
the city council will make that decision.
And I think that's where, so it'll be up to, Ray talked about the majority earlier. It's gonna be up to 4 councilors. And so unfortunately, it's hard for us to give that answer only
Right.
because it will depend on the city
Yeah,
council.
it's hard to look at the future and see what could happen. Sure.
Right,
Yeah.
and 4 councilors could decide one day, look, we're done.
Sure.
So that's a very hard part, unfortunately. Yeah, I certainly understand that the answer would be helpful, but depends on the mind of the council.
What I would add to that last question from Michael and online is, again, this isn't your normal shelter. Because of how it's gonna be set up, I'm not sure that you're comparing apples to apples if you try to use that 56% increase.
I understand that this is a managed shelter, but the residents who come in, they don't have to. I mean, or correct me if I'm wrong, you can't make them sign up for various services.
No.
I mean, they can just come in at night,
Mhm.
sleep,
And have the safe.
go
place
do
to
whatever they
sleep.
want during the day, and they
Mhm.
don't have to, follow any program.
Yeah.
And so they really can be permanent residents there, really, as long as they.
That's the dynamic. They had one individual in Walla Walla that had been there for a year and a half, goes to work every day.
Has a job.
It has a job and actually makes good money, but that's the lifestyle and they have the space that.
Right, because you're gonna have people that are going to choose this lifestyle. I mean, that's just what,
And
that's
it's
what they're gonna
behavior
want to do.
based, as long as they follow the
Right.
behaviors and we have the space. Now, certainly, we're gonna give more credibility to someone that really needs the space. So let's say someone making income and everything else and can afford a place, or, we're gonna try to encourage them. And at some point, I did talk to Walla Walla, they had an individual that had a veterans benefit, and they were making $3,000 a month.
Right.
And so finally they did ask that individual, you're gonna have to go. And, that's again up to this board and some of those rules and some of those actions, should we have capacities and things like that. But
Mhm.
ordinarily, it's open to the community. It's not, it's the unsheltered individuals.
And I also saw in there that it's supposed to be for Sweet Home residents. How do you?
There is a
determine-
residency clause in there. I don't remember specific 6 months.
Yes, how do you determine that somebody's been a resident for 6 months? I mean, how does somebody prove that? They're just gonna say, yeah, I've been here.
Well,
A lease, that they've lost the lease of their rental, they can
Yeah.
show that they have the lease in town. A power bill, I have an old power bill.
Or they can have a PO box.
I had a PO box.
I mean,
yeah.
that can
There's ways that they can demonstrate.
we're fairly we have Sean, and we're fairly in tune with the individuals that are here. So there may be some individuals, we do have an exception process. I mean, I have had an instance where some poor gal was basically dropped off on the side of the road with her, in this case, she had a child, we wouldn't allow that, but, a domestic violence situation, and there is an exception process by which the board, it even goes clear up to the city manager.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is I find it hard to believe that you're going to turn people away unless it's absolutely.
Well, we're like
overflowing.
these guys, I mean, we have to follow the rules, and the council could
But I
say,
mean,
you know
you're-
what, you've
you know what I
disrespected this rule this many times, we're gonna cancel.
No, I mean, just turn somebody away, just.
You try not
Out
to.
of the
So
number.
what I would assume would happen is, let's say somebody shows up and they're unhoused, they have nothing.
Exactly.
So
I find it hard to
what
believe.
I
you
could
would say
see
no.
happening was, depending on what time they showed up, what day of the week, you know what, you can stay here tonight, but tomorrow you need to go, we're gonna give you a bus ticket and help you get to Albany where you're from. and connect you with Chance or another organization that we have a partnership.
Do you have funding for that to transfer?
Yeah,
We do it now.
They do it.
yeah.
Yeah, that is a function we do now.
And that's a struggle we've had in the past, is we haven't had services here. But FAC and Sean and Jeff have worked really hard to get other organizations that are in Lynn County, Lynn and Benton counties to become partners with us. So,
Well, and I
Yeah.
believe I heard one of the council members say that if someone was, sent out of the shelter, I forget what they called it, you know.
Yeah.
That they would,
Trespass.
you were right, that they can be removed from the community. That's.
That becomes a
not
police
correct.
action. I don't get involved with
That's
that.
not correct.
Yeah,
You
you
can't
cannot
do
actually
that.
remove somebody from the community, but we've been continually move them along from places that they are not allowed.
we can make it difficult for them if they choose
Exactly.
not to follow the rules.
Exactly. You can't send someone out of the community. That was stated, and that's clearly you can't do that.
And Dr. Horton did mention something that I think is also important. We provide services for your community. We get 3 to 5 calls from the elderly that are about to lose their homes. We do rent assistance. We give gas vouchers. We do get people IDs, all kinds of things for the community. There's a lot of resources in that book. I encourage you, if you want, grab a book on the way out. And if anybody doesn't get one, let me know. And, we want to help the community with whatever. We get calls from a relative out of New York that had a relative here. Can you check on? I'm not sure. And we do some of that.
So I have 3 more questions from people online that I'll try to get to. Stephen A asks, so if the sex offender doesn't report, you will have no idea they are there? Yes and no. It's a small town. The guys kind of know they have the usual suspects, so probably not. We probably would know. But there is certainly the opportunity that if somebody came in and wasn't truthful, that they could certainly slip in. Can you define temporary? Yes. And I would define it as saying until another option becomes available. And the last one, do you think that having a sleep shelter will draw more homeless people to Sweet Home? I feel it will, making the issue bigger. Statistically, there are a lot of studies out there that actually say no, that does not happen. What does happen is when a facility becomes available, people you didn't know were homeless appear. So there's probably people that are couch surfing, going from friend to friend to friend that you don't see sleeping in the doorways downtown. And then once you have a facility, they come. And so it will appear like your numbers increase, but the study says that's not actually what's happening.
And I'll see if I can get the one. They just completed one in Corvallis with OSU. And yeah, it said the same thing. They aren't seeing the influx for the very reason that was just mentioned.
So that's everything online. We have a few more minutes. We promised you 60. Yes.
Another neighbor who could not be here tonight asked, I forgot about asking this. You were talking about people might start showing up, the couch surfers who are homeless, the people who are newly evicted. If you're only building the 28, and then you have a 10th, it might be another 20. I do know that Walla Walla has been at max capacity a couple times. Is there any chance that you will eventually be using the grassy area between the shelter and the neighborhood? And if so, can you guys put up a brick wall, was what she had asked?
No chance from us because we can't manage.
Okay, so you do have a set number then?
Yeah, our current set number is how many huts we have plus.
Plus whatever.
I don't know what we can leave because we have COVID rules also.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what we could, I could maybe set up another 20 by 40 tents somewhere on that facility, but it has to stay within the confines of that facility and it has to be manageable.
Okay.
We have a policy of 2 on. Now with the security guard, they have additional training and I don't know what the decision is there, but for our public presence, we always for safety as well as safety of our clients, safety of our.
And that is key. They were worried that there would not be a set number.
Yeah, I don't know what it could be exactly. We're gonna have, we originally said 30 huts. We were looking at the original time, we were gonna do some cars and RV. We said, we can't manage it. It has to be manageable. So we said 30 huts. Well, the group that did the engineering on it said, we can only fit 28. So now we've gone down to 28. As far as placing tents, I do have in fact 30 tents. Now, whether I can get 30 more tents on there, I don't think so. You know, from a manageability, what we found, in talking with some of the other facilities, 50 is definitely max. I mean, most groups, unless they're extremely well organized and have a lot of resources, I have difficulty managing anything over 50. And I think that goes true with most companies, most organizations. You get over 50, you're having a lot of difficulty. And I think, you know, again, the 7-person board will help manage that, but you know, right now it's the 28 huts is a given. We sized that aspect based on what we believe would be the use. And it's kind of like, well, laws, they've hit over their max like 2 or 3 times, and they're a city of 100.
Wow.
8, no,
I want to say 54.
yeah, they're the size of like a Corvallis or Albany, and they hit that boundary twice, and so we sized it based on what we.
Okay.
had.
Thank you.
One other thing on that is the lease agreement specifies that particular size. And so obviously agreements can be amended, but it's not going to be done it can't be done in a stealthy way. It has to be done, approved by the full council on an agenda item, public meeting. And so there would definitely be fair warning of any change like that. But as it stands with the lease agreement that we're looking at, it's going to be defined right in there, exactly that map is going to be in there.
Yes.
So temporary also means if things get out of hand within the 15-day termination period of the lease, not only when we find somewhere else.
Sure. Yeah. If it gets out of hand, the council will have the ability to give 15 days notice. Absolutely.
Right, there is a individual online who's raising their hand.
Yeah, if we can try. Sure.
Vicky, can you
Hi,
hear-
is this working?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Hi, this is Vicky.
Hi.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. How often will food be brought into the residents of the shelter? That's one question. You know, food, their needs, such as hygiene needs, different things like that. How often will garbage and the toilet facilities be cleaned? And then the second question is, will people that have their dogs, I don't think I've seen anybody homeless with a cat, but their dogs be allowed in? Because I know when Jammer um, would not go into warming centers in the church because of his dog Oreo could not go in. So those are things that I'm wondering about, conditions for the homeless in there.
So
Make sense?
Walmart had arranged to have meals brought, if I remember correctly.
And we've arranged, I believe it's set for twice a day right now, like a lunch meal and then a warm meal in the evening, and it's with your local soup kitchen here. I'm not sure, I'm not gonna commit them to 3 times a week. I believe they talked to us about it, but meals will be brought in. We'll also, within the community center aspect, we'll have things like cup of soups and things like that, you know, the other, I don't know what they call emergency food or whatever they want to, you know, those foods, but the other type of food is being brought in by your community, actually. And there's a commitment there to provide 2, maybe 3, I don't know. I think it's.
So meaning the community, so you just like SHEM or something
Yeah.
organizational, not like me.
not individuals. And then
Okay.
the intake of donations, we absolutely love donations, but it needs to be in an orderly fashion. I mean, if you go down to the old center now, you wouldn't believe how many packages of pinto beans they have, and they cannot cook pinto beans. And even if they could, I'm not sure anybody could cook them.
Right.
They're a difficult product to digest and deal with. So, you know, that's why we feel it's important to bring the meals into them.
Yes.
Such. And dogs are fine, pets are fine. We're low barrier.
Okay, good.
And the
Okay.
garbage, I don't know how often.
Yeah, so the garbage is, there will be garbage service, there'll be a dumpster or two.
Mhm.
And the restroom facilities will be cleaned. There will be, I think right now preliminarily, the plan is for a couple of portable restrooms. And the building will have sewer service as well. And there's a portable shower that they'll have access to once or twice a week, I think.
Well, depending on what it is, I don't know. We bought a shower trailer. It was a 6-place FEMA trailer. We're getting it converted, so it's ADA compliant and a few other things. So that's going to be brought in. And then the community center aspect, you know, it's used for warming, it's used for meetings with counselors, it's used to build community, and it's used to help warn people in the winter as well.
Okay. And then my last question is I am with maybe 2 other people, the house that's closest. My fence is right on that, the fencing, or next to the area. I gave a photo last night to the council members. So what recourse do I have if people come out of the facility and they're in the field between me and the facility and they're unruly, they're walking around, they really shouldn't be back there? What would I do as an individual to say, oh, this isn't good?
So I think you would have 2 options.
Hmm.
The first one would be to, I assume there will actually be a phone number to the facility. So you could directly try to call the facility and ask them to help manage it.
Okay.
The other is if they're doing something illegal, you always have the option of calling the police department.
Right. Okay. I didn't know there'd be a number to the facility because I wondered, when City Hall's closed.
I'm making an assumption that there would be a phone and a number available.
Great, given that that's City Hall property, I think city staff would want to know as well.
Absolutely.
You are more than welcome to call the City Hall main line and let us know that there's weird things happening on city property.
Yeah.
The lease, like we said, the lease agreement is for that corner. It's not for any of the rest of the property. And so the rest of that is all still city property that doesn't have a public designation. And we will see about protecting it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I had for this evening. And thank you.
So that's right at our 60 minutes. How perfect. I want to thank everybody. I certainly recognize, and we did not come here with the intent of changing anybody's mind. But what we did want to do is make sure that everybody had an opportunity to ask questions and that we would give the best answers that we could. We promise we will continue that dialogue. If you have questions, you can reach out to us, certainly. What I would like to do is continue to work through Leah, if that's a possibility, so that all the questions come funneled and then all the questions get dispersed. So I think you guys have like a Facebook page.
We have a Facebook page and an email list.
Yeah.
But people who are not on Facebook, there's like 50 on the Facebook and 25 on my email list.
Okay. And this way, everybody has access to the answers. The other thing I guess we could do is set up some on our webpage where everybody can look at kind of an FAQ and we could put all this stuff in there. So that's an option too.
And the phone number to call in case they see something.
Yeah. So this website, we'll go live very soon and there'll be a link, you'll be able to find it. If the council decides to put the facility there or wherever the facility is, we'll put that contact information in there as well and make sure you finish.
Was it in there when this is gonna maybe start happening?
Well, so council's holding a special meeting next Tuesday night at 6:30. At that time, we have some things that we're working on related to the documents to bring to the council. And I hopeful they're gonna tell us yay or nay on Tuesday night. FAC has got, resources ready to go. We would begin that work as soon as possible. I think we would. I'm not sure where you're at with the huts. The city's part has been like the ground prep and the sewer line.
The Warehousers donated a lot of wood. We have individuals that have donated a lot of wood. We still have some pieces left. Patrick Rogers over here is offering, he's a construction guy. He's offering to lead the construction. They estimate that they can build something like 5 huts a week. The high school wants to own and build a lot of huts themselves and use it as training and such. And then the community members, the Rotary's interested, and we want to offer the community to come out, help us out and participate and help out with that. So I think we were given like a 90-day kind of completion dynamic, but it could be faster if everybody comes and helps out or. But the materials, we're running down right now as we speak. I've got 35 doors. Everything's starting to line up. A lot of donations. I actually have an individual that has donated $100,000 to me. That's interested in making this a successful project for Sweet Home. He's kind of from this area and he thinks it's as well. So, yeah, we're gonna make this a big operation.
So yeah, one more.
I don't really understand the whole funding thing with the FAC. What exactly is it and how are they funded and what's really in for the FAC?
Our charter is we started, Shirley started this organization about 4 or 5 years ago. And we primarily did street outreach. We started working with Chief Lynn. He brought us in and we were able to get a vehicle and be better at street outreach. And what we're trying to do is provide a mechanism. What we're seeing is there's a lot of help at this level, but there's no transitional housing or there's nothing from transitional to permanent. So we feel like there's a better solution if you can start by giving people services, access to services, getting them a safe place to sleep, getting them a real house, those type of dynamic. And we were missing steps in that. So I went out and got a bunch of grants. I've been pounding the pavement to have individuals help us. So I was able to raise roughly $400,000 to $500,000 so far for this effort. It could have been, we service Lynn County and it could have been Lebanon. It could have been other communities, but this community seemed for us. They had a need and they had individuals that were very interested in trying to provide a solution. Your health council was absolutely instrumental. They went out and were trying to solve this issue, and we worked with them and said, let's figure out how to solve this. I'm working with this individual to provide perpetual services. I'm applying the February 26th. I'm applying for a $1, $3, and $5 million grant that does a lot of mental health, does a lot of medical, does a lot of housing solutions for this community as well. And so it's a lot of hustle, more or less, from a bunch of individuals that, are trying to solve it with you.
So with that, I want to say thank you for being respectful today. I want to say that we understand your concerns. And I want to say we share those concerns. And we're committed to working with you to make the best out of the situation that we're stuck with. Regardless of where the facility ends up. Hopefully we'll know that next week on Tuesday. What I would really like to see is council may say, yeah, we're not gonna put it there. I hope you'll continue to stay involved. This is a community issue. That's gonna take the whole community to help solve it. And honestly, are we ever really gonna solve it? I don't think so. I don't know that there's like a zero level that we're ever going to get with homelessness. It's just not gonna happen.
Stop this 3 minutes, will you?
So thank you for coming tonight. Again, we're available, reach out.
I
Yeah.
have a question that I forgot. So one of the councilmen last night said that none of the churches in town have offered, right? And then it was asked. Up until a week ago, almost all of us thought that this was happening someplace else. Everybody in town thought that location was happening at the old mill site. So maybe churches haven't offered because they didn't know that you were looking for a place. Everybody thought that the location had been chosen.
The faith community has been involved in this conversation from the beginning.
With the help.
With the health committee. The group One Sweet Home actually was the first organization that we reached out to help us with this.
Help donate money.
And I think they've done
They
some
help
things
with
to
the
support.
platform that.
Yeah.
Nazarene Church.
But they didn't feel like they were able to tackle this problem. They have been involved from 2 years ago when we really started digging in hard.
I love where you're going with that. And we'd still like to get them involved.
Yes.